My name is Rachel. I'm 26 years old, born and raised in a small town in Pennsylvania, and for most of my life, I've done everything my family expected of me. I graduated college with honors, took care of my younger siblings when mom was working late, and even stayed local when all I wanted was to move to New York and chase something. Anything that felt like mine. But nothing quite prepared me for the moment when a family vacation became a personal wake-up call. Before I dive into everything that happened, I want to ask you something. If you've ever felt like the underdog in your own family, like your voice is always the quietest in the room, then I hope you'll subscribe to this channel. Here I share real emotional stories that might just sound a lot like your own. And by subscribing, you won't just follow my journey. You'll find something deeper. A space where being overlooked doesn't mean being unimportant. We post new stories every week that make you feel seen. You deserve that. Now back to that moment. Started with a group text from mom. We're planning the family trip for June. Cancun, all-inclusive, 5 nights. Flights are $1,200 each. If you can't afford it, stay behind. That was it. No, how's everyone doing? No, is this doable for you, Rach? Just a command, followed by a warning. My heart sank when I read it. I stared at the screen, the fluorescent lights of the office flickering above me, the keyboard cold under my fingers. Everyone else in the family group chat responded within minutes. Booked. So excited. Finally, some beach time. I'm in. Just sent Dad my flight confirmation. I said nothing. Because I couldn't afford it. Not easily anyway. My rent had just gone up, and I was still paying off my student loans. I worked in nonprofit communications. Fulfilling, yes, but it wasn't exactly a goldmine. I'd been living paycheck to paycheck for the past 6 months, scraping by and telling myself things would get better soon. But Mom's message didn't leave room for vulnerability. In our family, you kept up or you stayed behind. That was the rule. I remember sitting on my lunch break, just staring at my coffee, lukewarm and bitter, feeling like I was 13 again and had forgotten my permission slip for the school field trip. Everyone else was going. I was going to be left behind. And then something snapped. Not loudly. Not in some cinematic, dramatic way. But quietly, deep in my chest. I pulled up my bank app, checked my balance, and winced. I could swing it, barely. If I ate ramen for 2 weeks and delayed my car maintenance another month. I looked up flights. Most were in the $1,100 to $1,300 range. Coach seats, layovers in Dallas or Miami. But then I saw it. 1 seat left. First class. Nonstop. $1,670. It was stupid. Irresponsible. Probably reckless. Booked it. And I didn't tell anyone. Not my mom. Not my sister. Not even my best friend. If I was going to be treated like an outsider for not measuring up, I figured I might as well start acting like one. On my own terms. At the time, I had no idea how much that one decision would change things. Not just for the trip, but for how I saw myself. For how I understood my family. And for what I was finally ready to stop tolerating. But before any of that unfolded, I had to walk through that airport, suitcase in hand, head held high, while pretending I didn't care what they thought. And trust me, I cared. So much more than I wanted to admit. The morning of the flight, I woke up 2 hours before my alarm. It was still dark outside, the kind of quiet that blankets everything before sunrise. I sat on the edge of my bed with my suitcase already packed by the door. My hands were shaking slightly, and my stomach was in knots. I kept asking myself why I was doing this. Why I'd spent almost $2,000 on a seat just to prove a point. But it wasn't just about the seat. It was about everything that had led up to it. Mom had always made it clear. Love in our house was conditional, earned, measured. If you wanted her approval, you had to be useful, impressive, low maintenance. That's how my siblings made it work. They played the game. I didn't. The Uber ride to the airport was quiet. I looked out the window, watching the city wake up. Traffic lights blinked over empty intersections. A jogger ran past in the cold, and for a moment I envied them. At least they knew what they were running toward. When I arrived at the airport, the check-in line was already long for the regular economy flight. I recognized my sister Anna at the far end of the queue, scrolling her phone, suitcase balanced precariously on its wheels. She hadn't seen me. I didn't walk toward her. Instead, I followed the signs to the priority check-in. The agent smiled and took my bag. No line. No wait. Felt like cheating. And yet, it also felt like air for the first time in years. As I walked toward security, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the glass. Same worn-out sneakers. Same coat I'd had since college. Nothing about me screamed first class. But I was walking into that terminal like I belonged, even if a big part of me didn't believe it. In the lounge, I poured myself a cup of coffee and stared out at the tarmac. The other passengers around me didn't seem fazed by the luxury. I felt like I'd snuck into a party I wasn't invited to. My phone buzzed. Mom. Where are you? We're at gate D22. Hurry, they're starting to board soon. I hesitated before replying. Me. Already boarded. I'm in first. See you there. No response. I imagined her face reading that. The confusion. The judgment. Probably an eye roll. But for once, I didn't follow up with an apology. The flight itself was peaceful. For the first time ever, I wasn't cramped in a middle seat between strangers. I had a window, a hot meal, a glass of wine, and silence. I watched the clouds outside like they had something to teach me. It was the first time I'd traveled without the weight of making everyone else comfortable. When we landed, I waited near baggage claim. They trickled in one by one. Anna, Mom, my younger brother Jack, and Mom's boyfriend Greg. They were in a group, laughing about something, all sun hats and carry-ons. When Mom saw me, her expression didn't hide it. First class? She asked, walking up to me. He nodded. Yeah. She gave a tight smile. Well, I hope you didn't waste your savings on that. We could have just sat together. I wanted to laugh. She hadn't once offered to help with the flight, or even ask if I needed it. And now she was pretending we were some kind of team. But I didn't take the bait. I'm good, I said simply. Anna leaned in. So fancy, Ratch. You hiding a trust fund we don't know about. I shook my head and forced a smile. No trust fund. Just decided I was done flying at the back of the plane. Mom raised an eyebrow but didn't say more. The resort was beautiful. Turquoise waters, palm trees swaying in the breeze, and white sand that felt like powder. But underneath all of it was tension. I could feel it when we sat down for lunch. So, Greg said, stabbing his fork into a salad. You flying first now. That's a power move. Mom glanced at me. It's not about power. Rachel likes to do things differently. That tone. The one that always meant difficult. Complicated. Not like us. I just like peace, I said. Jack snorted. Well, you'll find none of that here. We're doing tequila tastings, karaoke, jet skis. Hope you're ready. I wasn't. But I smiled anyway. Because as much as I wanted to be a part of this family trip, I was slowly realizing something. I didn't want to go back to pretending that shrinking myself was the price of admission. And this trip was going to be the test. By the second day at the resort, I realized something strange. I wasn't tired. Normally, family trips drain me within hours. The constant deflecting of comments, the awkward silences, the invisible role I'd long ago accepted. The one where I played along just enough to avoid confrontation, but never enough to really belong. But this time I was observing, watching how the pieces moved without trying to fit myself into the puzzle. I woke up early and went for a walk along the beach. The sand was still cool, and the ocean looked like glass, barely rippling. I sat under a palm tree and thought about the version of me my family knew, and the version I had just started to meet. A woman who didn't apologize for making her own decisions. Back at the hotel, I found the rest of them at breakfast. Mom was already mid-rant about the concierge messing up the dinner reservation. They told me 7:30. I said 7 o'clock. Why is that so hard? Anna nodded in solidarity. We should have booked the cruise. Resorts are always chaotic. I slid into a chair at the far end of the table. Mom glanced at me, then back at her plate. You disappeared this morning. I went for a walk. Alone. Yeah. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then, well, we're doing the zipline tour at noon. Don't make us wait. I held my coffee cup tight. Actually, I'm skipping that one. Mom's eyes narrowed. Why? I just wanted to do something different today. Maybe a massage, read by the pool. Greg chuckled. First-class spa treatments. Who is this girl? Anna smiled. She's going through her main character era. Everyone laughed. I didn't. Later at the spa, the masseuse asked if I had any tension in particular. I almost laughed. Upper back. Shoulders. She nodded knowingly. That's where we carry what we don't say. I lay there, eyes closed, as her hands worked into my muscles. And I thought about how much I hadn't said over the years. How many times I bit my tongue, said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. How many times I let Mom talk over me, or made myself small so she wouldn't have a reason to snap. And now I was finally saying something, not with words but with choices. That afternoon, I stayed by the adults, only pool with a novel and a piña colada. No one knew where I was, and for once, I didn't feel guilty. I watched couples laugh, strangers swim, the world move without me needing to explain myself to anyone. But the quiet didn't last long. At dinner that night, I walked into the restaurant in a blue sundress, hair still damp from the pool. They were all already seated. There she is, Jack said, raising a glass. The mysterious first-class traveler. I smiled, but I knew something was off. Mom barely looked at me. Her mouth was tight, and she picked at her food. I sat down, bracing for it. You missed the zip line, she finally said, not looking up. I know. I just don't understand what's going on with you. And there it was. I took a deep breath. Nothing's going on. I just wanted to enjoy the trip in my own way. But this is a family trip, she said sharply. And families do things together. I met her gaze. You said if I couldn't afford the flight, I should stay behind. That didn't sound like an invitation to bond. Silence. Anna looked down. Jack cleared his throat. Greg took a sip of wine like it might save him from the awkwardness. Mumbling. That's not what I meant. But it's what you said. I was just being practical. No, Mum. You were being dismissive. You always are when I can't do things your way. The silence stretched. My heart was pounding. I expected her to lash out, to deny it, to tell me I was being dramatic. Instead, she said quietly, "You're always so sensitive." He nodded. And you've always used that as an excuse not to listen. I didn't cry. I didn't raise my voice. I just sat there, calmly stating what had been true for years. She didn't respond. She just turned back to her food. That night, I went back to my room early. I stood on the balcony, staring at the stars, feeling equal parts terrified and free. I had said it, finally. And it didn't blow up the world. But I knew something had shifted. Something we wouldn't be able to put back the same way again. And as scary as that was, it also felt like relief. The next morning, no one knocked on my door. Usually, on family trips, Mom would make a point to keep everyone moving on schedule, tapping on doors, calling our names through the hallway like a general organizing her troops. But on that morning, the silence was complete. And it said everything. I took my time getting ready. Ate breakfast alone at the buffet, watching seagulls swoop low over the beach. I scrolled through my phone, then stopped. There were no new messages from the group chat. Not even the usual logistics. We'd entered the Cold War phase. And weirdly, I didn't hate it. Later that day, I walked into town, away from the polished resort grounds and into the heart of the village. Locals sold handmade jewelry under colorful tents. Kids kicked soccer balls barefoot across dusty side streets. The rhythm of life felt slower, freer. I bought a woven bracelet and a coconut drink and sat on a bench watching life go by. There, without my family's voices in my ears, I could hear my own thoughts again. When I returned to the hotel around mid-afternoon, I ran into Anna by the elevator. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh," she said, then forced a small smile. "Hey, hey," I replied. We both stepped into the elevator. The silence was thick. Finally she said, "So, Mom's in a mood." I raised an eyebrow. "Because I told the truth." Anna sighed. "You kind of blew up dinner, Ratch." "No," I said gently. "I didn't blow up anything. I didn't yell. I didn't even accuse her. I just told her how I felt. That shouldn't be considered an explosion." Anna leaned against the wall, arms crossed. She has her way. You know that." "I do," I said. "And I'm tired of pretending it doesn't hurt." We rode in silence for a few floors. Then, just as the doors opened, Anna said, almost too quietly to hear, "I get it. More than you think." I looked at her. But she was already stepping out. That night I went to dinner alone. The restaurant on the far end of the beach was quieter than the main buffet, with candles on each table and soft guitar music floating through the air. I asked for a table for one. The host raised an eyebrow but didn't comment. And as I sat there with my seafood pasta and glass of white wine, I realized something. I wasn't lonely. Not in the way I used to be, surrounded by people and still invisible. No one was talking over me. No one was making jokes at my expense. No one was rolling their eyes when I ordered something too fancy or too different. I could hear myself think. And the thoughts were kind. When I got back to the room, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find Mom standing there, barefoot, her cardigan wrapped tight around her. "Can I come in?" she asked. I stepped aside. She sat on the edge of the bed, hands in her lap. Waited. "I didn't know you felt that way," she finally said. "You never asked." She looked up at me, eyes glassy. I thought I was being strong. Raising 3 kids, holding everything together. I didn't have time for softness. I sat across from her. I wasn't asking for softness. I was asking to matter. She swallowed hard. "You do. It didn't feel that way." "I know," she said. "I see that now." The silence between us wasn't hostile anymore. It was just full of things we hadn't said. Things we still didn't know how to say. She reached out and touched my hand. "I'm not great at this. Talking feelings. But I'm glad you said something. Even if it hurt." "It didn't hurt," I said gently. "It healed." She nodded slowly. "I don't know how to fix all of it. But I'd like to try." For the first time in a long time I believed her. The next day we had breakfast together, just the two of us. No one else joined. No one interrupted. She asked about my job and this time really listened. I asked about her childhood and she told me stories I'd never heard. About her father's temper, her mother's distance, the way she learned to survive by not needing anyone. Made sense. Too much sense. But it didn't excuse everything. Still, it opened a door. And for now that was enough. On our last morning in Cancun, I walked to the edge of the beach just after sunrise. The tide had pulled far back during the night, leaving shallow pools of water scattered like mirrors in the sand. Pelicans soared low above the waves, and the wind was soft, warm, forgiving. I took off my sandals and walked through the tidipools, my reflection rippling beneath me. It was the first time I'd looked at myself in days without judgment. I wasn't sure if I felt proud, but I did feel whole. For years, I had thought healing had to look like forgiveness or resolution. But what I learned during that trip was something quieter. Healing can just be space, room to breathe, the ability to say, "That hurt and I'm still here." Back at the resort, Mom was packing. She didn't say much, but her tone had softened. Less clipped, more careful. "Check out," she touched my arm. "Thanks for this week. For not shutting down." He nodded. "Thanks for showing up. Even if it was late." We hugged. Not a tight movie scene hug. But real. Awkward, brief, but with weight. The kind that means, we may not have figured it all out, but we're not pretending anymore. At the airport, the others were in line for economy check-in. I walked to the first-class counter without looking back. This time it didn't feel like rebellion. Felt like a choice. While I waited in the lounge, I texted Anna. Me. Hope you had a good time. If you ever want to talk, really talk, let me know. A few minutes passed. Anna. I do. I just never knew how. Let's start with lunch next week. Smiled. That was more than I expected. And for the first time, I wasn't bracing for disappointment. On the plane, I settled into my seat, window open, watching the tarmac roll by. The attendant offered champagne. I declined. I didn't need bubbles to feel light. As the engines roared and we lifted into the sky, I closed my eyes and thought about everything I'd carried into that trip. Resentment, fear, the need to be seen, and everything I was leaving behind. Not all of it, of course. Some things take longer. But I was no longer the girl who waited for permission to be enough. I was the woman who had finally stopped asking for a seat at the table, and started building her own. And this was just the beginning. If you made it to the end, thank you. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever been the quiet one in your family, the misunderstood one, the one who finally stood up and said, enough, then this channel is for you. Subscribe to hear more stories like this. Not perfect stories. Not fairy tales. But real ones. Stories that remind you you're not alone, and that your voice matters, even if it shakes when you use it. You deserve to be heard. And I'll be here every week to remind you of that. Rachel.